Good morning. I suspect some of our colleagues are still en route, trying to get here in various and sundry ways, but I think we're ready to get started. So the beginning of the conference seems like it was a very long time ago, and here we are on our last full day together. I'll better now. Good. That was my voice and not the microphone then. Sorry about that. Uh, I found a quote from an American writer, psychologist, and spiritual director, Henry Nouwen, that I thought might give us something to start our day on. Nouwen was originally from Holland, but spent most of his life's work in the United States. And he wrote, "Those who choose, even on a small scale, to love in the midst of hatred and fear are the people who offer true hope to our world." For me, one of the things about these last several days is what Nouwen is pointing to. I have been deeply, deeply impressed by you, each and every one of you, in terms of your commitment and your desires and the work that you do, and in our coming together. The ease with which people connected to one another, were willing to share with one another, where strangers have become or are in the process of becoming colleagues and perhaps even friends along the way as we go forward to do the important work that we've been involved with. I'm going to turn the program over to Veronica in a moment, just on a level of practical details. After lunch, please come back here. We'll have an opportunity to hear from the rector of the university. The university has been a wonderful host to us. He was not able to be with us on the opening day, but he wanted very much to come and greet people on behalf of the university. So we'll gather for that. Then we're going to break into 4 working groups: education of refugees, education about refugees and migrants, social responsibility, and research. The purpose of those 4 working groups will be to discuss within the group what action suggestions they'd like to bring back to the larger group. We'll come back together, we'll share those recommendations, see what the sense of the group is, because the ending of this conference is the ending of just a chapter in a book that's getting ready to be written. The next chapter needs to be written. So the work this afternoon will be very important. We'll gather it all together, share it, and then take the responsibility to keep encouraging its movement forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to
Thank you, Tony. Before starting our session, another practical announcement. We found this in the auditorium. Somebody lost it. And so after the session, you can come if the owner is here and pick it up. So again, good morning and thank you for joining us in our last day. This is a new session of our first session of today, and it's on collaborative advocacy, making positive differences in public conversation and perceptions regarding migrants and refugees. So communicative strategies for action. So we know that we live in a global context of polarized perception related to immigration, and especially we can expect that after last Wednesday. And so there is a very urgent and pressing need to counter harmful and inaccurate narratives about refugees, migrants, and migration in general. And evidence-based arguments have often failed to resonate with audiences, while misinformation and myths have spread rapidly with negative implications. Racialized language in conversation about refugees and migrants and nativist discourse at different levels of society remark varying degrees to which inclusion and exclusion manifest themselves in public conversation. not to take into consideration the almost total exclusion of refugees and migrants' voices from the public sphere. Actors, including governments, mass media, civil society, and the private sector, have a responsibility to respond by working together to ensure a balanced public narrative, recognizing the broader impact this narrative can have on social cohesion, support for diversity, and even innovation. In this section, we want to reflect on the ways in which forms of exclusion and inclusion are manifested in media narratives on migration, and how we can arrive at a proper use of language and adequate safeguards for all those who have sought refugee and have been granted protection everywhere in the world. But in this case, we will focus a little bit more on Italy. So I leave the floor already to our first speaker. Vittorio Longhi is an Italian journalist of Eritrean origin. His writing has been published across a range of media, including The Guardian, the International New York Times, and La Repubblica. Since 2007, he has trained journalists and media professionals on behalf of various United Nations agencies. And he founded in 2012 the online news site Equal Times in Brussels, and many more experiences and book publication that I encourage you to look for. Thank you.
Is the PowerPoint here? Sì, partire. F5. Sì. Vabbè. Grazie. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, having me here today. It's a real pleasure and honor. I will tell you about invisibility. Invisibility of not just migrants or immigrants, but people of African descent. This has been quite an issue for the United Nations over the last 10 years, and it is an issue for the European Union as well. I am a European citizen of African origin, of African descent. From my father's side, my great-grandmothers were Eritrean domestic helpers. And so my family, the story of my family dates back to the end of the 19th century when my great-grandfather went to colonize Eritrea in the Horn of Africa. So the issue of African descendants and the legacy of colonialism is quite dear to me, and it's quite relevant today. So when I started, to study and research a bit more about the story of my family and the story of all, let's say, children or grandchildren of colonialism, I decided to write this piece for the New York Times about 8 or 9 years ago, trying to understand what it means to be an African descendant in Europe today. And what I came to realize is that there is some sort of invisibility, meaning that African descendants are not perceived as European citizens in full, and the complex identity and the issue of complexity is not even considered by the institutions, national institutions and European institutions. And I'm quite keen on what Ralph Ellison in 1947 wrote in his well-known novel Invisible Man. And let's read the very first lines of the novel. He wrote, "I'm an invisible man. And I'm invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imaginations, indeed, everything and anything except me." This was 1947 in the United States of America. But my concern is that this is still true, not just there, but in Europe today. So I started, to research and write and interview people, other African descendants, journalists, writers, people around me, about the issue of invisibility, and I came to realize that the minority of Europeans of African origin are a minority. We are around 15, 20 million people in Europe, in the European Union at least. And there is an issue of invisibility. The ENAR, the European Network Against Racism, says that racism and discrimination are still common experiences faced by members of Europe's black population, black and brown people, and people of African descent in Europe. And by people of African descent, I mean not just children of colonialism, but also the second, third generation of immigrants today. They are not recognized, and there's still a huge lack of knowledge about their situation and making this issue invisible in Europe. So, in 2015, the European Parliament decided to support the United Nations initiative called International Decade for People of African Descent, that is ending right now, this very year in 2024. And this is an attempt by the United Nations to shed some light on the legacy and the consequences of slavery and colonialism on today's rampant wave of racism, discrimination, and xenophobia all across the globe. So not just in the United States, not just in Europe, for people of African origin. And in 2019, the European Parliament decided to adopt a resolution in support of people of African descent, establishing fundamental rights of people of African origin, because they realized that the new immigration flows over the last 20 years have created and are still creating some kind of discrimination, persistent structural forms of racism in Europe. And so what did they say in the European Parliament and also the Council of Europe in Strasbourg? They called on member states to declassify their colonial archives, to include some forms of reparations, like offering public apologies, give back stolen artifacts to countries of origin, and especially the European Parliament encouraged member states in Europe to make the history of people of African descent part of their curricula and to present a comprehensive perspective on colonialism and on slavery, which recognizes their historical and contemporary adverse effect on people of African descent. Now, this is quite an issue, but what really concerned me when I found out about this resolution was the reaction by member states. So I wondered, how did national politicians and the media react? What do you think happened after this resolution 2019? Not much, not much. So there was actually no reaction by national politicians. The issue of Afrophobia or the fundamental rights of people of African descent did not arouse any kind of concern or debate. It was not part of any reform in school. And national politicians just ignored the fact that the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, were debating this issue and were so much concerned by how the legacy of colonialism are still affecting black and brown people in Europe today. But what is even more frustrating to me as a journalist, as a writer, is that the media did not pick up the news. And so the fact that the resolution was not ignored just by politicians and institutions, but by the media itself. And this is quite frustrating, because when politicians fail to deliver and to follow up what comes from Brussels and Strasbourg at the national level, it should be the media, I believe, that should make some pressure and should shed some light on what's been discussed in Europe these days around these issues, which are quite controversial but relevant issues. And we can see the actual effect, the impact that the issue of racism, xenophobia, discrimination is having on national and international politics, especially these days. So my frustration as a media professional, as a writer and a journalist, is not just about the unreported piece of news by the mainstream media around this issue, but about the fact that the media in Europe have a problem within. So discrimination and, let's say, ignoring the fact that there is a minority of black and brown people in Europe, people of African origin, is a fact that lives within the newsrooms, within the publishing industry, within the media. So diversity in the media sector is quite an issue, because the very first form of discrimination, of exclusion, happens within the media. And I must say that I can confirm that. And it does not just, this kind of lack of attention or sensitivity to diversity does not regard countries like Italy, but is quite widespread. A couple of years ago, there was this research by the Reuters Institute at University of Oxford, and they tried to understand what is the situation within newsrooms and media organizations. And they surveyed different media outlets in Germany, in Sweden, and the United Kingdom, which are considered, especially from the south of Europe, the most civilized, and in terms of human rights respect and diversity respect, quite beacons, quite high standard countries. And they realized that there were no editors at the highest level coming from a migration background, no black or brown people, no people coming from the global south, second or third or fourth generations in Sweden, in Germany, and the United Kingdom. So you can imagine what happens in Southern Europe, where the situation is even worse. When I think about my own country, about Italy, I cannot even think about a single uncle man or uncle woman in the broadcasting system that has a migration background. So this is part of the problem. The representation, it's not just about the way that the media portrays people of African descent or people coming from the global south, let's say, but there is a problem within the media of diversity and respect of different backgrounds. We know from the Media Watch Carta di Roma that Sabika will tell you about, that immigrants and people coming from minorities do not speak for themselves in the news industry. When there is a story about migration or racism, the average rate of immigrants that speak about the issue or that just comment or express an opinion is just around the 6-7%. And this chart here shows that in the last, let's say, 10 years, apart from a couple of years like 2018 and 2022, the average rate of immigrants that are interviewed that can have an influence, an impact in the news is quite low. So who talks about migration in the news? It's politicians, it's journalists, it's NGOs, it's so-called experts, but seldom, quite rarely, it's immigrants themselves. But the former European Commission was quite aware of this fact, so that is why they adopted this resolution in 2019. And the former Vice President, Vera Jourova, she was quite clear and adamant on that. And she said the Commission will support these efforts, for media diversity, with funding, and she acknowledged the fact that people with a minority or racial or ethnic background in the media remains a problem that needs to be addressed. So now, with the new European Commission, we truly hope that the same kind of agenda will be carried out and will be somehow perceived, because the problem of rampant racism, the actual issue of discrimination, is not so easy to address right now with the political environment that we're in. And not just the European Commission. Let me remind you that around the issue of Afrophobia, for instance, the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, every year they issue this report on Afrophobia, trying to test and measure what is the level of racism around the countries that belong to the Council of Europe, which is a bit broader than the European Union. And the former Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunja Mijatovic, she said that European countries should make the fight against racism and racial discrimination a top priority. And she said quite clearly that there is no shortage of legal, professional, and financial tools to achieve all this. What is lacking is political will. So we truly hope that the new Commission and member states will have some kind of clearer and stronger will to address this. And the Commissioner added that, the Commissioner added that the need to tackle the roots of racism against Black people and to address the legacy of colonial past and historical labor is quite widespread, and it's urgent. And so I leave you with this other book. We opened with Ralph Ellison, 1947. We end with Afropean by the British-American journalist Johnny Pitts, and his book, I think it came out a couple of years ago, Afropean. Johnny tries to describe how much this part of Europe that has an African origin, so this 15, 20 million of people that are not even acknowledged in the data, because in Europe we don't have data about ethnic origin or migration background. So it's also difficult to count these people, and that contributes to the invisibility that I mentioned at the very beginning. So we truly hope that the new European institutions will address the fact and will express the will, to fight against racism, discrimination, and will make some pressure on the publishing industry, on the media, to have far more diversity in the newsroom. And that is, I think, one of the top priorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Vittorio Longhi for this insightful presentation and bringing up this issue and the issue of diversity in the media, that also lead us back to the importance of specific education and training also in the media sector. But first and foremost, the will is a key. Without will, we cannot move much further. So I'll leave the floor to Sabika Sahapovia. She's graduate in journalism from London College of Communication, has been working as a freelance journalist for over a decade now. In her work, she focuses on immigration, political and religious extremism, social integration, racism, and its connection to Italy's colonial past. And she collaborates with Associazione Carta di Roma, that literally translated in English is the Rome Charter Association, in training journalists in Italy and abroad on the rules and regulations to be followed in the field of immigration. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? Good. Okay. No. think it's a fake mic. Hello, hello. It literally has to be in your mouth to work. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabika Shapovia. I am, yes, a journalist, and Vittorio already said a lot of interesting things and mentioned the association I work for. But before going into the details of what we do at the association, I just wanted to talk about, I really love the quote about the invisible man that Vittorio shared with us, because it is the story of every child of immigrants in Italy for sure, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate from other countries too. So it's funny because I have a very Roman accent when I speak Italian. And whenever I call people, I imagine in my mind what they're thinking, because I call them, I'm just a voice with a Roman accent. So they probably imagine a normal, average Roman white girl. And then I say my name and they go, oh, but I have a last name that's Shapovia. Povia is Italian. So they probably think I'm the daughter of some hippies who went to India when they were young. And then they're like, oh, we need the details of your parents, da, da, da. And I say their name. I'm like, oh, actually from Pakistan. So suddenly in their mind, I'm probably like long hair, true, and a unibrow, not true. And then, you go into more details and I say my religion, oh, I'm a Muslim. And suddenly I'm wearing a scarf in their imagination. And then I just wonder, like, if that person was in front of me, how would they have reacted? So I love when I introduce myself to people to give them all the details I can, just to confuse them, just to be like, break all the stereotypes. Be like, hi, I'm Sabika Shapovia. My parents are from Pakistan. I'm a Muslim. Like stuff that people don't really want to know, but I just love telling them. In Italy, because of my identity, I ended up becoming a journalist who writes about immigration. I did not choose that. It was chosen for me because of my background. I studied journalism, and at some point, everyone was like, oh, we have a brown girl in the newsroom. You can write about all things brown, which is a lot of things in Italian mentality, right? Like anything from the global south to terrorism to whatever. So I've been doing it for long enough now, over, I don't know, I don't want to say over how many years, but many. So I am actually an expert now, but not when I started off. I have been working with Carta di Roma for a long time, and we always ask ourselves this question. Italy, there was a survey from the European Union a few years ago, and Italy was the country whose perception of reality was the furthest from actual reality. And it's something that we asked ourselves about a lot. We thought, why is it like that? Like compared to other countries, it's even worse over here. And that question was first asked by different members of civil society and journalists back in 2008 when Carta di Roma, the Charter of Rome, was drafted, because there was a murder story. Like a woman and her child were murdered. This woman was married to a Tunisian man, and so media decided that he was guilty. Now, this dude was like, I wasn't even in Italy. I was in Tunisia. And he had tickets to prove it. He had stamps on his passport, but none of that was enough. The media had already decided he was the person who did this. After the investigation went on, at some point they discovered it was just, the neighbors who got into a fight with this woman and murdered her and her child. But it took a while. And that was the first time where people sat down and thought, okay, this is not okay. Why was it so easy for us to believe it was a Tunisian man? And to answer this question, they drafted a set of principles, which became somewhat of a code of ethics. When you write about immigration in Italy, you have to follow these rules in theory. In Italy, we have a council of journalists that professional journalists are members of, and you have to do training courses every year, and you have to keep up to date, and you have to respect certain rules. Otherwise, you will be kicked out of this council of journalists. The problem is that to be a journalist, you don't have to be a member of this council, because there's so many different forms of media now, and not everyone is officially a member. So it becomes difficult to, let's say, punish people when they break these rules, which happens on a daily basis. So in 2011, 3 years after, the association was created in order to implement, this charter, which otherwise was just a set of rules. In Italy, we're really good at doing that, at making some great rules and then finding 100 ways to break them. So the purpose of the association is to promote the Charter of Rome. We organize training courses for journalists and for future journalists in journalism schools. And we act as a media watchdog, like Vittorio was telling you. So every day we get a press release with all the articles that talk about immigration in some way, and we go in depth in these articles, and we try to find out what the main stories are, what the most common words being used are. If there's anything that is incorrect in the vocabulary, we try to point it out. We get in touch with the journalists, with the editors, with the papers and the newsrooms, even with, for example, police, because often we found that a lot of things that were being published were taken from press releases, official government or police press releases. So we also do trainings in those contexts, which are a bit trickier. And every year we publish a report, which is available on our website, and it has all this information, and it tells you basically what the main like what the word that was most used in the year to talk about immigration was. So I would like to actually, before I do that, I will first just tell you the 4 rules, because the Charter of Rome sounds like it's like a really long book full of like really interesting things. It's literally 4 very simple rules, and they could be applied to anything, not just immigration. Rule number 1 is vocabulary, like make sure you use the appropriate language and the correct words to define people, situations, things. So, there's like nothing like illegal immigrants. No human is illegal. So we can say irregular if they're, undocumented, or just words like that. So it's literally this: use the correct words. The second rule is protect migrants and refugees' identities. So when we interview them as journalists, we have a responsibility to not expose them, especially when they're coming from complicated and complex backgrounds. Sometimes people will say, oh, the person gave me permission to interview them or to take their photograph, but these people are not always aware of what can happen after that. We know what can happen after that. We know that if a person is from Eritrea, there's a high chance that their family back in their home country will be, persecuted because of this. We know that it might get more complicated for them to achieve the documents they want to achieve in the countries they are. So it's our duty to protect their identities. And the third rule is to always consult experts. So, if you go online, anything you Google, someone has already asked that question on Yahoo Answers or Bing. So you are not going to just take a random answer. You should go on official government websites. If you want to know how many, requests for asylum were made last year, you're not just going to go on a random blog that says, I don't know, make Italy great again. You're going to go on some other website, more professional. You can go on UNHCR's, IOM's. There's so many organizations who do this kind of thing. So we have to always make sure that we're giving experts a voice, not just any random person. And the fourth rule is context. This is a bit tricky because it's sometimes you can give half a story, but that will, for example, a story like, this was an actual newspaper story. 4 people were stopped in a drug-related case. The Pakistani guy was found with 3 kilos of hashish on him. And then it doesn't mention anything about the other 3. And I dug into the story and I was like, oh, what's going on? Who are the other 3? What happened? Did they not have any drugs? But they did, but they were Italian. So it's not a lie. Like if the title of the article is Pakistani guy found with 3 kilos of hashish, it's true, but it's only half the story. So context is important. Sometimes we had a big story of a girl who was murdered by a Nigerian drug dealer, but the context of that story was drugs. There was a problem in that town with drugs. This girl had issues. She'd escaped from this rehab center, and no article that talked about the story talked about the drug problem. No one looked at it, in a wider context. They spoke specifically about a black guy murdering a white girl. And that black guy soon became all black guys and soon became all immigrants. And so we had like months of TV debates on how immigrants kill white women. And that was, not useful to anyone. And it was completely taken out of context. So context is extremely important. Now, Vittorio mentioned earlier how politicians are the people who we most hear from when talking about immigration in Italian TV programs mostly. And that's, the percentage is ridiculous because it's above 30% politicians and under 8% is a migrant or refugee or member of the diaspora's voice. And usually they're only called to speak on certain crime-related stories or to share their experience as a victim of something, but never in an active way, never as, people who can actually give you context, tell you about countries of origin, which is a whole other thing we're missing in our media. When I say context, I also mean this. We have very little coverage of what happens in people's home countries. So we have a huge immigration influx, but then when you tell people, oh, did you know most people, I don't know, a few years ago, most of the people coming to Italy were from the Gambia. And people had no idea where that was on the map and why these people were coming because we weren't telling those stories. So we have a big problem with how we cover international stories. And yes, basically, this is a difficult word, politicization. Is that a word? In Italian, it is. Well, of the immigration phenomenon, like how did it become so political? Because Vittorio mentioned it happened over roughly the past 10 years. So I can tell you that story. Because of the annual reports that we publish, we began doing this in 2013. There was a really big shipwreck off the coast of Italy in Lampedusa. Over 300 people died. I think it was 368. And at some point, everyone was shocked. They were like, okay, these people were literally here and they died. So everyone said, this is not acceptable. We're Europe. We're not going to let people die at sea. So that year, most of the stories on the paper, the most used word to talk about immigration was Lampedusa. Lampedusa was a symbol of unity, of peace, of fraternity, of, welcoming. And that's when, they said, we're never going to let anyone die at sea again. It's been over 10 years now, and it's over 20,000 people who've died at sea, at least the figures that we know, official ones, and there's so many that we don't know. In 2014, Italy began its first and only ever mission to rescue migrants at sea. It was called Mare Nostrum. It was a mission at sea, so it was like an official Italian ship that was rescuing people at sea. Its objective was not like the Frontex missions to protect borders. It was to protect the people. Because like I said, everyone was thinking we have to do something. We're not going to let these people die. In 2015, you might all remember the picture of Alan Kurdi on the beach in Turkey, this little boy who was found dead. So that's the year that in Italy, everyone realized that immigration is not an Italian issue. It is a European issue. So Europe was the word of the year. Now, when we realized the problem was a European problem, I'm using this word, I don't think it's a problem, but that's when we decided that we were going to be sharing migrant quotas with other countries, right? We said everyone will take some, and so it won't be a burden on anyone. And that's when the first countries started saying, no, we don't want them. And they started building walls and fences to keep them out. So the word of the year that year was walls. The year after that, the Mare Nostrum mission was suspended. There were walls across all of Europe at that point. So what happened is the NGOs stepped in. Civil society decided they were going to take a stand. So all the ships, Open Arms, Sea Watch, MSF, they all went out. Word of the year was NGO, and that's when the criminalization of NGOs began as well, because Europe was closing its borders, but the NGOs were out there trying to rescue people and bring them here. So the year after that, we had elections coming up in 2019, and in 2018, immigration became a huge political campaigning issue, and the word of the year that year was Salvini, who is one of our most anti-immigration politicians, who won a landslide victory in 2019 at the elections. His little party went to having like 30% in all of Italy. The year after that, it was Salvini and Carola. Carola was the captain of a ship of an NGO. I think it was CI. I don't know. I don't remember. And she was told she couldn't let people disembark in a port in Italy, but because she had a very tense situation on the ship, she decided to dock at the port anyway. And so that year is the year the debate became polarized. So it was already political, and suddenly it was the polarization. We had Carola on one side representing the migrants, the refugees, the civil society, and on the other side we had Salvini. So it's kind of scary if you think about it, how we went from 2013 to like welcoming people and wanting to rescue them and not wanting to let them die at sea, to less than 10 years later, shutting our borders and making this a debate that is way more political than it should be. So yeah, I think Carta di Roma on the website, we have guidelines. We also have guidelines available in English, which help. It's kind of the translation of the Charter of Rome. There's a little glossary that has some of the most common words that people confuse in the media. And then it has a diversity checklist as well, where you can ask yourself some questions, because as people who work in this industry, in the media, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, like everyone else, we also have stereotypes, prejudice. I wake up every day and I try to unlearn so many things before I can learn new ones. It's a constant effort. So sometimes it helps to have these checklists and you look at them and you're like, these questions are so simple and silly, but when you ask yourself the questions, you realize the answers are not always this simple. Carta di Roma is often accused of being too nice. We have a word in Italy where it's buonista. It's hard to translate because, Vittorio, any suggestions? Because it literally the etymology of the word comes from buono, so nice. And buonista is a person who does nice stuff, but it's a negative word. So it's mind-blowing how we do this. It's used to insult a person. You say they're like too nice. I don't even know if that's the correct translation. It's a bit tricky. So people at Carta di Roma were always accused of being buonisti. And what we reply to that is always that we are not nice. We don't promote like nice journalism. What we promote is good journalism. And there's a difference. In Italian, the pun works because buono means nice and good. But in English, it doesn't work. But I will end it on that quote. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation, delivering such a critical issues in such a nice way and not bonista. It's a good service to all our audience that come from around the world. So, and for sharing the important work Carta di Roma does, and also for summarizing in such a great way the last 10 years or so of our communication and really, the issues, if you will, our countries faced on the topic. And I'm also happy to give the floor to Rahel Saya. She's a passionate freelance journalist and a tireless advocate for the right of women and children. In 2021, her commitment was recognized with a prestigious international award, and she was honored also many other awards, and she attended special ceremony at the Stadio Alberto Picco in the Spezia Football Club, making the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. As a journalist and writer, Rahel shared her journey as an Afghan woman, and so we are looking forward to hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Is it okay? Hello, everybody. Such a great honor to be here. And then I have to thank you, Urbaniana University. And then such a great honor to be with Mr. Lungi and then Povia that I had honor to speak. I think it was 2021. And then I was speaking with Veronica as well. So today I decided to be a storyteller, to speak about my journey, about my story as an Afghan girl, as a refugee, as a student, such as we are here at university, and speak about migration, and the differences with being a refugee, and then, of course, the problems and the challenges who they are facing, these people nowadays here around the world. So I'm going to start about telling my story. I am Rahil Saya and I came from Afghanistan 3 years ago. I left my country 3 years ago because of the situation, and I'm sure that every one of you know about my country. And that's why maybe I'm like not only today, but being a refugee, I was speaking few hours ago with Veronica that being a refugee, it made the people very sensitive, you know, because here we have a differences between migration and refugee. A person who wants to become a migrant is always searching for a brighter future, but the situation is okay if the person remain on their own countries as well. And if the person want to go to because of the situations, because of the economic, because of the education, because of the work, and maybe becoming a migrant is not so difficult, respecting to become a refugee. So a person who want to maybe become a refugee, no one want to become a refugee, I think. And when a person decides to leave the country, it means that the person is in danger. And in any possible way, the person have to leave the country. And then when the person is arrived in a country, maybe with becoming a refugee, in the meantime, the person can be the migrant as well in the country that hosts this person. I have 24 years old. When I left my country, I had 21 years old. I graduated from school 2018. 2021, I started to study international relations in my country. And I was working with some journalists 2019 as a freelance journalist to speak about the women's situation and children's situation in my country, to sending the article and interviews from Afghanistan here in Italy. Maybe that's the reason that today I'm here, because these people was the people who they helped me that I left my country. 2021, when I came here, when I arrived here, so as well as I finished English language, that's why I think when I'm speaking English, maybe my English is now English Italian. So because when I started to speak English after 5 years, in the meantime, I was trying to learn Italian as well. So that's why maybe when I'm trying to speak, my English is English Italian. And then when we had a presentation in our university, I'm studying La Sapienza. The professor was telling me that you are not Italian, but your English is Italian. I said, yeah, that's why. So when I came here, first in 2021, we arrived here in Rome, and then we went through to maybe 6 or 7 hours with the, I exactly remember, we went from Rome to Genoa with the ambulance who they are with the for the croce, with the crosses, yeah. So we arrived in Genoa, and then I started my new life in Genoa, in Cugoletto, near Savona, I think. And I started everything from zero, like starting to learn the language, to be like to be as a person, as a child, to want to integrate in a country, who even this person is or has 21 years old. So my journey started from there. I went to Terza Media to learn the Italian language. And then I was studying for 1 year at La Iulma, Milano. It was, I was studying corporate communication, public relation. But in the meantime, I was living in Genoa. So I had to do a trip every day from Genoa to Milano and from Milano back to Genoa. And I'm sure you know very well that the trip from in the morning and then coming back in the night, how is a little bit difficult. But I was accepting the situation because I was telling that, okay, so here's the situation and that's my, you know, my life. I have to accept and I have to go ahead. After 1 year, I decided to speak with Sapienza to ask a scholarship, and the motivation of this placement and replacement, it was that I was a little bit, I would say, tired to do this small trip or maybe a long trip every day and then maybe work to another city and then study in another city and then live in another city. So I speak with them, and then the motivation was that I would like to stay in a city and then study and live, and everything have to be okay a little bit. So 1 year ago, I tried to come from Genoa to Rome, and it was another, maybe I would say, migration for me. You know, that I was telling that, okay, so once I left my country, and then I went to Genoa, I was trying to integrate there, and then I decided to move once again. And I cried as much as I could because I was thinking that, okay, so once I decided to, okay, so go there. And I was, you know, getting used there. And then after that, I was trying to come here, to come here and integrate in another society. Okay, maybe this time it was not so much difficult, not because I knew the situation, because I was getting used to the situation. So I came here, and then, of course, as you know, that Rome is full of opportunities. Whatever you want to search, just go ahead, and then with your hard working, you can achieve it. So about my situation of about our country, my country, Afghanistan, is a country that I know that maybe after 2021, maybe the people, they experienced the greatest migration, and in any possibilities, ways, they just wanted to leave Afghanistan, to leave their own mom, you know, to go just ahead, and then there was not any final destination that the people where they want to go. Maybe today, me as a testimony, I was one of the greatest, and I was one of the fortunate girl that I was able to leave Afghanistan, to go out from the situation, and to be a storyteller for the people who they are not able to speak anymore, especially the children and the women, who today in Afghanistan, the women, they are not speak about anything. Even a woman cannot speak with another woman, and even a woman cannot, you know, hear and the voice of another woman. So far from speaking about the Afghanistan, because the only sentence that I would say, and really I'm kindly ask every one of you to, war is war, and I'm an Afghan girl. For me, it doesn't matter we are going to speak about which country. I think that we don't have to forget the countries who they are in crisis, who they are facing many challenges, who the women, they cannot do anything anymore. And we have to be the voices of people who they are not speak anymore, who they cannot speak anymore. So as the title is about refugee and migration education, migrant education. So I think the people who they come as a refugee or migrant, of course, they need to integrate, not only integrate about, you know, the final ambition that they have and the final destination who they want to arrive. It's very important that the people who they want to try to integrate to accept the culture, or maybe if they need to, not only here in Italy, who the people they want to remain in this country, learn the language, accept the people, accept the culture, accept the country as their own country. Because I think that finding a place as a home is very important. It doesn't matter where you are coming, but everywhere that you feel peace inside of yourself, that's home. And Italy is my home because I found that word with any possible meaning. So maybe I would say that the people maybe as a solution, as an option, who they know maybe as a solution a little bit, maybe they know English language, maybe for them it's not so much difficult to integrate to go ahead, but language is one of the most important things for a person who is migrant or refugee. Because maybe the language is the thing that is expressing yourself. What do you want? If you have headache, if you have any kind of problem, if you want to go to pharmacy to buy something, you know, when you are happy, you want to express yourself, you are happy. So that's very important that I would say as a refugee that language is one of the most important things that you want to go ahead with it when you leave your own country with any possible reasons. And then they, after that, the people who they live their own countries, who they faces challenges, and then the country that they host, even the university that the students are, you know, some, I would say as a guests, because they are leaving their country and then they are coming to the university to study, to go ahead. So what these people wait from this country, from the university, that to be a person who feel that, okay, this place, these people, this university, this country is hearing me. They are hearing that what I need, what I feel, how I'm going ahead, what I accept from people, that how they can help me, how they can be a reason that, okay, so they lived once and they have to find themselves once again on the country, and especially at the university that they are going to study, to learn, even a school even. So, and after that, we have many issues about migration or being refugee. We have these stories such as Lampedusa, as Povia she was telling before. We have still we are speaking somehow about the Cutro, that, you know, every one of you, that what happened there, and then the people who they want to, you know, leave their own countries. So they are risking their lives. So it means that, okay, so the things that they were searching, they couldn't find in the country, I would say, the region country that they were. So they are coming and they don't have to face the problems, the challenges that they had before. And it depends on the people, on us, that me, not as a refugee, but a citizen, as a citizen of Afghanistan, as a person who I'm feeling myself, you know, that an Italian girl, that, okay, so now I'm learning the Italian language, I'm here, everything is okay. How we can help the people who they are living, who they are coming new. So what I can share my story, how can I help them, how can I, you know, if they have some problems with the documentation. You know much more better than me that doing a documentation, how is complicated here in Italy, maybe around Europe, but as I'm here in Italy, I can, you know, easily understand that, okay, so when a person is coming, and then even if they are coming through the, you know, studying documentation, who they are, refugees, migrants, in any way, that if they want and if they need to do the documentation, we know that how much it is difficult. So if we have some experiences, if we can become a hope for someone, so why we have to hesitate it? So that's why I think that, okay, so if we can be useful for someone, so we don't have to hesitate from that one. And then that I think maybe not personally me, but I heard and I know that the people who they are coming, who they are refugees, you know, that they are facing the challenges such as, you know, what is comportamento? behaviors that, with different behaviors, such as, I don't know, language, the way that they are clothing, and then maybe I could say that the color of the face, the body, and then the country who they are coming. I think that out of everything, we have to accept each other as a human being, and humanity have to be everything, and not, the language, the culture. If I decide to come here, of course, it's a reality that I never want to hide. Okay, I'm an Afghan girl. I'm coming from Afghanistan. The situation of my country is like this. It is the reality. But I have to accept Italy as a country that I would remain here. I would learn here. I want to, become as a citizen here. That I don't have to be an strange person for this culture, for these people, for the people who they host me, and they open their own doors for me, and then they I think that at the end, I would say that students who today we are here in university, I think that not only the students who you are here, but me as a student, we are a growing group of migrants who we are, trying to bring changes, and then we want to be useful for each other. If I'm a second year student, if someone is coming from the first year, so I would say that, okay, so the first year have to do like this, that the first year you have to go ahead with this, and then the same thing with the refugees, and then the same thing with the migrants who they are coming with any reasons that they say. And like always, when I'm participating to the events programs, I would say that not only my country, but as I'm part of this country, from my country, Afghanistan, the things that we can do, I'm a storyteller, that I'm coming here to speak about my country and the women and the children and the young generation. I would appreciate the people who, even as a sentence, are telling me that, okay, what we can do for you. Okay, so you said the situation, you said about your country, you said about the situation, what is going on in general, what we could say. Vice versa, I would say that it was a situation about refugees, about Afghanistan, about migrants, that I shared my personal idea, what I experienced in my personal life. So I would say that what we can do but together, for the people who really need to help. It doesn't matter Afghanistan, it doesn't matter Africa, it doesn't matter wherever. What we can do all put together. If we can do one scholarship for one person, that's much more great things. If we can give 100 scholarships for 100%, for people, for girls, for women, for young generation, for the people who tried a lot in their lives, and today they are in their homes as a housewife. So that's why maybe when I heard about this program, when I thinking about refugee, migrant, I was thinking, and I was speaking before with Veronica, that it made me very sensitive, because it made me emotional, because when I'm thinking that, okay, I'm going to speak about what does it means being a refugee, I can feel with the bottom of my heart, because I'm a refugee. So what I wait from the people is this, that we have to accept each other as a human being, which is, it means a lot for a refugee. And for me, not today as a speaker to speak about all these issues, but it's an honor for me to, as a refugee, as a young journalist, maybe not so much young journalist, and as a person that I'm trying to integrate in this society, to go ahead and to remain here as a refugee, as a a young girl, as students, to be useful in this society, accept this country as my own country. The things that I lost on my country, I have to find it here. And during these 3 years, I found it really. And I think that not when you it will be my last sentence, that when you left your country, of course, the things that you faced, the challenges that you faced, the things that you are doing part of this country, they will remain forever in a corner of your heart. When you will become very strong as maybe we like women, and then like all as a human being, we are strong because we are always going ahead. We are not, fermare, stopping in our own place that we were yesterday. So we are trying to go ahead. When you will become so strong, of course, the first thing that you will remember, that's the suffering you faced in your life. When you will, feeling very weak, and then you were, sometimes it's very normal that you have to be, sad a little bit. And again, you have to remember the suffering that you faced before. And you are much more stronger than you were yesterday. So thank you so much. Thanks for your hearing, and thanks from your coming in this strike day. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your story, your emotions, for remind us that we are all human beings living in this together, and that, to giving voice to your people, but to the people who are struggling all over the world, and sharing us stories of resilience, which is very important. And thank you, all of you, also for making my position very easy, because all of you stayed in your time. And we have time for a session of question and answer. So please.
Hello, do you hear me? So I'm Bonald Patrick. I'm also a migrant journalist. So in a way, I could be seated in the last remaining seat and tell my story. But don't worry, I just limit myself to 2 questions or observations. One is that, yeah, the context is often not provided, but sometimes it's not provided when it's politically insensitive. I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, there was flow of migrants or refugees, or I would rather say people that were manipulated politically, taken from various parts of the world to Belarus and then directed, pushed towards Poland. And in the media, well, I didn't make the statistics, but at least the ones that I was able to follow were accusing Poland of being a racist and intolerant people, unable to accept migrants, whereas it was the Belarusian government that wanted to destabilize European Union and destabilize the European normal functioning democracy of Poland. And that context was often not provided. Just one thing. If you could comment on it, it will be interesting. And the second thing is that Mr. Longhi is writing for Guardian, New York Times, La Repubblica, all those, and these are examples of the mainstream media, and mainstream media means also the majority, and majority of them are leftist liberal, and they're against Trump, Brexit, Putin, and so on and so forth. I try to keep it very simple. So how is it possible that those mainstream media who you are writing for, from the majority of journalists, not me, or maybe not other journalists, but why are they not diverse themselves? Why do they not make this a priority? If they think that this is a political issue, why do they not do in their newsrooms? Because this is a critic that you said, it's a critic that should be also inside, not outside, to say that in a pub, in an academic forum where everyone would say, okay, you are right, but they are the bad guys over there. So I just did not get, why is it not in those media, Guardian, BBC, we could go on really. So
maybe we can collect a few questions and then they can reply. And please kindly introduce yourself. There was a question up there. Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Meng Shao. I'm with Jesuit Refugee Service. First, I just want to thank all of you for being so open and candid with your stories and certainly the learning. Second, I also want to thank you for putting front and center the issue of representation in the newsroom. Certainly it's an issue that persists across many industries, including many of the institutions that we represent here. So thank you for that. My question is related to when you think about representation, especially Black and brown representation, and we think about the consolidation of media ownership, at least from the US perspective, what solutions or what opportunities do you see to continue to push forth to increase representation, but in light of limited funding or this consolidation? Thank you.
So René Mikalev, Gregoriana, thanks for your presentations. This session is about collaborative advocacy, effective collaborative advocacy. And we've had a year of elections in which most politicians who have spread hatred and fear of migrants have won. Fact-checking is not going to solve this problem. We have a lot of psychological studies on this, that we have a portion of our electorates in most countries who are completely outside of the normal news cycles. They don't have a sense that facts need to be checked. So I think traditional journalism is doing a great job, and I appreciate what you do, but we risk being on the losing side of this battle. So how can we get through the cognitive dissonance? How can we get through the emotive games which are being played at this time? I mean, what is journalism thinking also about the future of your career in a situation where facts don't seem to be important anymore? Thank you.
There was one last question.
So my name is Maurice Eliaremia, and cultural. Okay. My name is Maurice Eliaremia, and also a cultural mediator, and definitely I might be the one who registered your asylum in Geneva, so it's possible because I was there. And my question, I'm very sorry for what you went through, and we hope that there will be change in all circumstances surrounding all. And my question to the journalists and others, so we are talking about the good representations when it comes to medias and so on and so on. And I have not been hearing from journalists, and what do you think that we can do to solve the problem of migrants in Lebanon, especially African migrants in Lebanon who are not allowed to give birth in Lebanon because they are domestic workers? So majority of them face deportation camp of recently because they are migrants. So, and nobody is talking about that. So I think injuries to one is an injuries to us. We should also help us to bring out this voice so that people can know about this. Thank you.
Could you please repeat and rephrase the last?
So my question is, what can you do to help us bring out the latest crisis, not crisis, anyway, discrimination against a migrant in Lebanon, especially Africa's migrants, and which there is a law, according to them, prohibiting them of giving birth in that country, especially domestic migrants.
And there is another question as well.
Okay, one last question, please. Yeah. Okay, two questions briefly.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, that was really wonderful hearing your interventions. And I just wanted to ask for some advice, which is when we think about collaborative advocacy, what would be your top tip for an NGO who is working in refugee education but doesn't have like a big communications or media team or anything like that? How can we best work collaboratively with people in the media, even if there aren't many of them, but who would be interested in putting forward stories that contribute to narrative change? how would you advise that we best make the most of limited resources and capacity that we have and go about doing that?
Okay, thank you. My question is on, or goes to Vittorio. You highlighted in your presentation, you highlighted on the classification of archives promulgated by the European Parliament. So my question is, I would like to know the primary motive of that call for declassification. And secondly, to also know whether there is any form of correlation between the identified declassification and the restoration of the dignity of people which were lost during that process of maybe colonization. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try to answer the questions. I'll start in order. Context not being provided for political reasons, you mentioned. I think that is correct. And I think that is exactly what happens in the media in Italy as well, where journalism is historically extremely tied with our politics. So the stories we report on are the stories that the politicians are debating on. The topics we go in depth in are the ones that are in the agenda of our government. I think somewhere along the way, the media lost some of its I'm not sure if independence is the correct word, but even just the will to explore other stories. Like now, people are looking at what the politicians are saying or what's trending on social media and saying, oh, we should do an in-depth story on this because people seem to be interested. And we are not dictating the agenda anymore like it used to be. If we wanted people to talk about the war in Yemen, all we had to do in the past was publish front pages about the war in Yemen and people would talk about it. Now there is so much information that it's hard to navigate, and the easiest thing to do is just go with the flow. So yes, I think you're right that context is often not provided for political reasons. You were talking about the mainstream media. I work in mainstream media now, as in I work on a TV show in Italy, which is on a national channel. It's a weekly show, so that's mainstream media. And I know that when I started working there 6 years ago, I felt like an infiltrate. I thought, haha, now you have me here, friends from NGOs, because I come from that background. I come from an activist background, and I feel like the only way to change the discourse in mainstream media is to infiltrate it. So representation. And what you were saying about The Guardian, the New York Times, etc., I mean, yes, they are the mainstream media. They're not the only mainstream media, and they have issues. They also have issues. It's not like because Vittorio published one article, we're going to forgive all the rest. But I think that in general, like the perception of also of media being leftist, I'm not sure. Like certain values are more common to the left, so I can see how some newspapers will, push for those. I do think that a journalist, no matter how much we tell ourselves that we're objective, we're never actually objective because we choose the story we're going to tell. We choose who we're going to interview. We choose how to write that story. If we're editing in video, we choose what music to put in the background, what lighting to shoot in. All of that is a form of subjectivity. And I think that that is inevitable for humans to do. I don't think it's possible to be fully objective, but I'm not sure I'm answering your question. I'm just thinking out loud. There were so many questions. I didn't have time to prepare the answer. But yeah, I think like I said, representation is important. Then I'll go to the second question that was asked on how to increase it. I think it's somewhat happening naturally. My generation of children of immigrants in this country were all activists and journalists. I'm an activist and writer. I'm an activist and musician. The younger generations, they will not say they're activists. They will say, I'm a musician, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. And I think I don't think it's fair to always leave it to them to change this world, like, to the younger generations, because it somewhat takes away the responsibility from the adults. But I think the talk is happening, and I think something is moving. I'm not sure what we can do more except create opportunities, maybe, specific training courses for people with a different background who can, like, professionalize into the sector, because often children of immigrants will not have the same opportunities because in the lack the citizenship, for example, in Italy it's a big issue, so they won't be able to access all public courses. And so maybe, yes, create opportunities for educating the younger generations and giving them those opportunities, and somewhat also giving them just the option. And I guess once one of us makes it in the mainstream, like once he's been published on the New York Times, or once I'm working on national TV, that's already a big step. But for example, I kid with my colleagues at work all the time about how I cannot be fired because there won't be a brown person in the show anymore. So I'm not sure that's exactly true, but I somewhat want to believe this. So yeah, I'm not sure what we can do more except create more opportunities. I'm not sure which questions to go to. How to go through emotions when we're writing, and it's difficult. I don't believe. I mean, I know that's a thing. I know people don't reason with their heads now, but with their gut. I am not okay with that. Every time, even I am on TV debating with people and who are going with their guts, I respond with data and numbers, stats. Those cannot be contradicted. And for me, I feel like it's a superpower because others don't do it. And it's like what I was saying about my identity. It throws people off because they're not expecting you to actually know stuff. They just want to talk. And then you're like, but I know things, and what you're saying is incorrect. And that helps. So I think the only way to get over the gut instinct is to bring data, and that's what I think. How to bring stories to light, Lebanon and other stories. I'd never heard of the story you were mentioning, for example, but specifically, I believe networking with colleagues overseas definitely helps. With Carta di Roma, we've done trainings abroad. We've done trainings in Nigeria, in the Gambia, in Senegal, trainings for journalists there who cover immigration. We have told them what happens on this side of the world. They have shared their experiences, and we've created a connection, and they can send us like their articles and their stories to publish on our website. So I believe networking and talking to colleagues and trying to bring stories to light is the main way to go. I'm never jealous of my stories because I have a job, I guess. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this story for them, but you can still do the same story for someone else, because my objective, as my background, like I said, was that of an activist. I'm never like, I want to be the first one or the only one to talk about this. Is the more people talk about it, the better. So I often do that, and I think it really helps to share stories. I will definitely look into the story you mentioned. The top tip for the NGO, I'm going to take a couple more minutes to think about. And Vittorio, you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, quite a few things, but now thinking back at what Sabika was telling you about the word in Italian buonista, which is not so easy to translate in English. I mean, being too nice and kind. There is an implication in that very word. And I'm talking about what our colleague there mentioned about progressive mainstream media like The Guardian, The Times, the BBC, or while, let's say, anti-immigrant far-right, xenophobic politicians and media outlets tend to criminalize immigrants, refugees, people from minorities in general. The risk with progressive media is, and we're seeing that, and we just saw that in the United States, for instance, is that we tend to be elitist and patronizing. And this is somehow one of the root causes of what is happening today in the representation of immigrants, of minorities. So there are two sides. Things are so much polarized and radicalized nowadays. And so if on one side you tend to criminalize, you're against the invasion, you want to build walls at the borders with Mexico, we have the Mediterranean Sea, and there are walls everywhere in the Middle East, let alone. On the other side, you have, the idea that migration is not a serious issue. I mean, it's not so difficult to address. So let's welcome everyone, regardless the consequences on the local populations or on the labor market, for instance. So my concern with progressive media, I agree with you, is that we tend to be quite simplistic when we deal with those issues. And it's okay to be rational and provide data and accurate fact-checking and be as much accurate, objective, and fair in our reporting. But at the same time, we shall never forget that we cannot, write for just a part of our population. We should be accessible and talk to everyone. And in my experience, that is not always the case with the progressive media. And so I don't blame the audiences for being so much, distracted by the narration that, the anti-immigrants media and, let's say, spheres, which is not just the media, it's not just the news, it's not just journalists, it's an industry of fear. So it's so widespread. And on the other side, we have a bit too weak reply to that, response to that. Many things were mentioned, but in order to think about solutions to increase representations of minorities, Black, brown people, immigrants, children of immigrants, new generations of immigrants and refugees, children of colonialism, in my experience, it's just about making pressure, lobbying the institutions, the media, politicians, starting from the very local level. For instance, Carta di Roma, they do excellent training at the very local level with journalists of very local places, where we tend to ignore that, when we speak about the big names, the BBC, the Guardian, the Times, but most of information and most of the impact, the influence that the news industry has on people, on election, is at the very local level. So part of the work of Carta di Roma is to try and make reporters at the very local level to understand the importance of language, the importance of stereotypes. And again, not just when you tend to criminalize, when you tend to, oversimplify the issue of migration, but also when you have good intentions. But if you are too patronizing with migrants, with refugees, sometimes you harm them, you end up harming them, because you tend to inferiorize them. You tend to be so much above them, so much somehow, it's a different way to be somehow racist. And this is so much felt also in newsrooms, because you have the other side that sometimes tend to tend to really patronize and oversimplify the issue. Collaborative advocacy, networking, as Sabika was mentioning, is the only way. Try to build grassroots network so that you can, make your voice heard and make some more pressure on institutions and on the media industry. In terms of representation, as I mentioned, the Council of Europe, not so sure about this new European Parliament. At least the Council of Europe is trying to lobby the publishing industry, the media industry, in order to make sure that diversity is guaranteed, is ensured within the newsrooms. And this is one of the things I'm working at. Let's say from the top, but there are not just top-down approaches. I think that there should be both top-down approaches from the big institutions to the media industry, but at the same time, there should be some bottom-up approach, some bottom-up fights and lobbying and pressure from grassroots activism. And then my friend mentioned the European Parliament calling on member states to declassify the archives about colonialism. Why is it so? Because the European Parliament and so the international institutions, the United Nations, first and foremost, realized that after the colonial history, the dark side, the dark pages of European colonial history, unlike what happened in the United States with slavery, in Europe, there has been almost no debate about the impact that colonialism had and still has on the way we perceive from Europe the global South. We tend to see at immigrants and at the global South with colonial eyes. That is one of the issues. That is a central issue. That is a crucial issue when we deal with migration policies, because we either tend to criminalize again or to patronize immigrants. So that is part of the problem. And that used to happen also during colonialism. And in the countries, in the European member states, in the countries that had and have so much history, colonial history, there has been no debate, let alone Italy, but other countries that had for so much long time colonial history, like the UK, France, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, and Italy as well. After the Second World War, especially, so the last 80, 90 years, there's been no debate about what colonialism meant, not just for those countries who were colonized and somehow stolen by so much resources, but for Europeans as well, that are not even aware about what has happened over the last 2 centuries. So that is the reason why there is this pressure from the European institutions and the Council of Europe, especially on member states. So if you have some more questions.
Yeah. I don't know if Rahel wants to say something. I just wanted to ask. Okay. So yeah, it is a narrative of othering, I would say. It's a culture of othering. So one more question, but very briefly, we have 2 more minutes, and then I encourage all of you to follow the discussion and conversation at the coffee break, please. Anna-Marie?
Yes, thank you all very much for your interventions. My name is Anne-Marijn. I come from Anne-Marijn Kozijns. I come from the Netherlands, and I'm a student here in Italy. Talking about representation in the newsroom, I immediately also had to think of violence targeting journalists internationally, especially women journalists, and especially women with an intersectional identity, which creates, of course, women leaving the sector, journalists in general leaving the sector, but also creates a barrier for entering the sector. And I was wondering if you have seen this in Italy around you, if you want to share, and where you maybe see possibilities for civil society or public authorities to tackle this issue and to make the media sector safer for everyone who tries to enter it. Thank you.
Um, yeah, well, the issue of violence against women does not leave out any sector, including the media. Obviously, it takes on different forms. In Italy, we still have a big issue of representation of not really women journalists, because we have a lot of those, but editors or in top positions in the media. I think at the moment we have two, and one is a local newspaper, that are run by women editors in the whole country, counting national and local press. So that is a ridiculous number. The newsrooms are mostly filled with women, but not even, yeah, they're not in any position of power, even on TV. I was surprised the other day, just watching, my parents were watching a program on TV that they're reviving from the 90s. It was a game show, The Wheel of Fortune. It's back. And it's funny because the host is this guy who's been on TV for as long as I remember. So I was saying to my parents, what? Like, he's still around? He's still hosting a show? And what really surprised me in the show was that there was a woman. There used to be one in the 90s who used to like turn the letters during the show, dressed in a really short dress. And I mean, it was Berlusconi's channel, so she was following the dress code. But I was surprised to see that in 2024 they brought that show back, and the woman is a black woman, but it's the same format. Like, and I can't believe that on TV. I know this is slightly off topic, but I just can't believe that on TV that still happens. And when you look at TV hosts, I'm talking about TV because that's where I've been working for the past 6 years, and the hosts are mostly men as well. There's very few women hosts, and they'll mostly do the morning or afternoon family shows. They won't like do hard news. There's literally like maybe two who do hard news. So that is definitely an issue, and the violence against women and the discrimination against women and transgender women in the media sector is a consequence of this as well. So I'm not sure how we can fix it except by being there and waiting for our turn, or starting. I'm kind of past the phase where I ask for things. Now I'm in the phase where I demand things. So in Italy, transgender journalists, I can't even think of any. There might be, but they're definitely not in the mainstream media or in anyone's radar, because it's just culturally the shift is happening now. We're kind of not really on top of the game in this section. And with regards to violence against women, we have so many issues in Italy, like a ridiculous number of females killed by males, like partners and family members in Italy. And that is one of the main stories here, but it's never covered by the media with the appropriate terminology. That's a whole other conversation where, you know, you justify the violence with oh, it was, you know, he was jealous, as in you romanticize jealousy, you romanticize possession, you excuse a lot of things. So we, as Carta di Roma, we've also worked on violence against women. We do courses, like training courses on that as well. Again, focusing on the correct terminology to use, because I feel like right now in Italy, there is no awareness of the issue. That is, like, there's no like general awareness of the issue. So, so it's really hard to change the structure of the media and to avoid situations like, you know, violence and sexual harassment happening in the offices until people here actually understand what the issue is. So I think I don't have an answer for you, because it's something that is still too far away in this section. Pardon? Yes.
It's a cultural issue that goes more far away than migration towards.
Yes.
I mean, violence
don't know
towards migrants.
Rahel, you want
Yeah,
to?
but really briefly, because Tony also wanted to say
Yeah.
something, and we then.
Lascio rispondere
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lei su questa.
Okay, so what I can tell you is that I'm not going to speak about Italy because I think that for me it's very early to speak about this kind of issues as it's only 3 years I'm here. But what I would say in general is this, that I think many years ago that we are still learning, that I think that we are the generation, we are the women that we want to bring changes, such as the sectors that the women they are entering, they want to enter. Is this that years ago there was this kind of issues, that if if there was a woman who was very talented and she was made for this work, and the sector, the office, and then the bando was telling that, okay, this work is only for men, even the woman is talented, she is not for this work. But I think that according to many years ago, we are we are not so much far away to solve these problems, but I think that we are coming ahead, we are solving this kind of issues, but maybe it's very early to change totally, completely, but we are bringing changes, I think, in general, I would say, not only in Italy, but I think around the world, because if there was in an office working only one woman or two women, and the rest, they were all men, especially the media, I think that nowadays we see a great percentage of women who they are working in media, and then they are the people who, I think that not only in media, but even in general, it's better that we, as women, we don't have to accept in any kind of issues in, with the, how can I say, in any kind of, accepting in any way. I mean, that we have our own talent, the women have their own talent, even in media, I think they're representing, because the way that we are going to represent the issue, to speak about the title. But I can see many changes, but of course, as Povia was telling, that, okay, so we are maybe far away to solve this issue in general, but I would say that we solved a little bit, and we are going ahead maybe a little bit slowly, not because we don't want, but we have to, step by step, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's gonna be a long journey, but
Sure.
so Tony, please.
Thank you. Take the prerogative of being the last person to speak before we go to the coffee break. Thank you very much. It was very interesting, stimulating, but the conversation points for me to a deeper issue that was not in the agenda, and is helping to shape the agenda for the next conference. Cardinal Czerny yesterday in his address spoke about the increasing withdrawal of a commitment to liberal arts education in universities, that less and less emphasis globally being placed on what we have traditionally called the liberal arts education. So the critical thinking, rational engagement, the search for truth. Now, I started teaching 52 years ago, and was a rector for a long time. I saw that the battle to keep the liberal arts in an American university that was supposedly committed to the liberal arts because of its Catholic tradition, the pressures to move away from a traditional engagement in a rational search for truth is being lost. I think that issue and the issues that were touched on today, that people say, well, I feel this way. And somehow facts don't seem to make any difference anymore, or less and less of difference. I feel that way, period. That's the end of the conversation. And so we may need the next time around, some help from social psychologists and folks that work with trying to understand how people's are being manipulated by forces outside of any of our realms of desire to see happening. But there's the engagement and a general commitment to the liberal arts education, the search for truth, and in the media to neutrality. We have had some political leaders who clearly have said those aren't important anymore. We can manipulate people and get them to come to conclusions that are not based in truth or in fact. And I think our sectors, an old educator and young journalists, I still call you a young journalist, by the way. Yeah, stick to the title as long as possible. Somehow I think there's a conversation that needs to be had around some pretty traditional things, the truths and the search for truth. And how do we reach that? With that, I think it's time for coffee.
In 10 minuti e poi devo dormire. Ma io devo dormire prima della diretta, se no scroll. Comunque,
I think it's my last chance to say good morning since it's 10 minutes to 12. So good morning. And good morning is also a way of suggesting that if you're carrying on a conversation, please bring it to an end so we can start this next session. Well, we're running a little bit behind schedule, understandably. We will try to finish this session by 1 o'clock, then go to lunch and try to be back here by 2:15 for the greetings from the rector of the university, and then the closing, but very important last working session, and then a reception at the end. So we've got a lot to do between now and evening time.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. Very slight variation from the program this morning. When I saw the final program, I thought nobody in their right mind wants to listen to me speak for 2 hours, and so I've invited some friends to come and join. Professor Nick Gill from University of Exeter, who I've had the pleasure of working with for several years now. But as an example of collaboration, we actually met at this conference several years ago, and that started what has become a multifaceted, brilliant collaboration between University of Exeter and RE UK. And my new friend, who kindly agreed to join this panel last night. So the first time that I came to this conference, as I walked through the door, I was greeted by Manal from UNHCR, who said, "Oh, Catherine, excellent. Someone's just dropped out of the next panel. Can you be on it? It starts in 10 minutes. So I'm just paying it forward. And Polly, Polly next time can do the same to somebody else. But thank you so much for agreeing to join us. Our topic for this session this morning is applied research. Research that tries to find practical solutions to known or existing problems. And sometimes, and it is important, we can spend ages on the problem and like looking really closely at the problem and dissecting it. And I think it might have been David Holdcroft yesterday who said we're preaching to the converted, and kind of we know what the challenges are, and we do know that through the whole arc of the education system, from primary all the way to university, that young refugees face multiple barriers getting into education, getting on in education, and then getting out of education and into meaningful employment. And that really does matter. And there's been some incredibly helpful presentations elaborating on some of those things over the last few days. But for this session on the final day, we're going to try to get towards some solutions, some which we have found already through applied research collaborations, and some which we're hoping to progress further collaboratively, crowdsourcing with you this morning. So we're going to look at 2 examples from RE UK briefly that finish with an identified gap, so a known problem in existing knowledge. And Polly is going to share some of the work of Amala that we think is actually a real step towards helping us to understand what could fill that gap. And then going to hand over to Nick, who is going to, and I should say that what Polly and I are going to speak about is related to the first half of the education system, up to but not including university. And then we're going to pass over to Nick, who's going to look at that final part of the education system and universities and some research that he has done, is involved in, and possibly he might even mention a book that he is writing at the moment. And then with the time that we've got left, which I think will be slightly less than we thought it would be, so apologies, but we are going to get you talking to each other about solutions that you think have got the potential to be scaled or to support other contexts, and try and actually write some of those down for future possible collaborative work. So next slide, please, Lee. Thank you so much. Oh, great. Thank you. Wonderful. I thought I would just start with, as I'm talking about a couple of examples from Refugee Education UK about how we work with universities. I think the thing that I mostly wanted to say is that I was having a conversation with another chief executive of an NGO, not based in the UK, recently, and they were saying, oh, do you not find it really frustrating when the only engagement universities want to have with you is that you're a gatekeeper to people that they want to interview or run focus groups with? And it's like, yes, that is really frustrating. And we get probably 4 or 5 emails a week from universities or people affiliated with universities saying, hey, I'm doing this research study, or I'm doing this PhD, or I'm doing this, whatever it might be. Please, could you organize for me to interview young people that you're working with? And we just have to say, no, we can't. We have the time, we don't have the capacity. The young people are not just a resource to be sort of like tapped into as and when. What we're interested in with universities is meaningful co-working that values the academic expertise and values practitioner expertise. We're in a really fortunate position that we have a research team of 4 people. And so most of the work that we do with universities is where we are working together to actually design the research, do the research, write up the research, and then amplify the findings from it. And we also have a group of about 15 refugee youth advocates in the UK who have completed our sort of research training module, who we also, like, wherever possible, they are also an integral part of the research that we do. If that's how you like to work, then feel free to get in touch. But I also wanted to just take a moment to extend an invitation to come and visit us if you are passing through London. We have had a really challenging 4 years. You can see a picture of what now looks like a beautiful building on the screen. This is our local high street. It was a bank. It had been derelict for 5 years in 2020. So since 2015, we, through a long story that I won't go into, but maybe over a coffee if you come to visit us, we were able to buy this building. It had mushrooms growing in the carpets and bats in the roof, and it was completely abandoned. And we gradually, over the last 4 years, managed to restore it into an education centre for refugee children and young people, and a home for our work. So we love to host people there. So please do come and say hello. It was a painful, painful journey that had me on my knees many, many times. But we have got there. The first kind of applied research initiative that I want to just share a couple of brief takeaways from, is a project that we ran last year called Promising Practices in High Income Contexts. And it was a follow-on from a research project that was led by Save the Children and Pearson and various other organizations a few years ago, and UNHCR, when they looked at promising practices in refugee education. But the case studies that they looked at, they for various reasons, had to limit it to low income and acute crisis contexts. So there was this gap in learning. So we developed this research proposal and got together with academics from Refugee Reach at Harvard Graduate School of Education, also University of Nottingham in the UK, and expert practitioner advisors from Qatar Foundation, Save the Children, Sirius, which is a European network on migration and education, and carried out this research. So it really was a collaborative effort, and it tried to identify and amplify promising practices from case studies of refugee education in high-income countries. So we had 29 case studies. We had an open call for case studies that were then analysed by the research team, including people from that steering group. From 29 case studies across 12 different higher income settings. From that, 4 themes and 11 promising practices in refugee education in high-income countries came out. You'll be relieved to hear that I'm not about to go through those promising practices one by one. But I just wanted to quickly show you the 4 themes that they fell into, and just pick out a couple of things. One that led to an additional applied research partnership with a very practical outcome, and one where we've identified an existing gap that we'd like to see some more done in. So if you can see the top right one of the themes where there were some really great promising practices, but also gaps, was in educator training and support. I think that's probably common to all contexts, but we were looking at some of the particular features of that in the context that we were working in. So having seen this gap, which came out of one NGO University Applied Research Partnership, we got together with University of Nottingham and Professor Joanna McIntyre in the UK and looked at how together we could combine her theoretical framework on refugee education with our practice, young people, and also research that we had done. And as a result of that, oh, sorry, I forgot to click before. That was the top right was supposed to be there. So there are the 4 themes. So as a result of that, we developed together a kind of research-informed 8-module online, fully asynchronous, i.e. study it in your own time when you want to, teacher education course on supporting refugee children in schools in the UK. So that was really great. It was a really positive outcome from a pure research project to a university NGO practical partnership. It's been live since the summer. We had some classic tech issues, not having funds to get a platform that we could actually have enough participants able to do it. But it's now live, and it's been completed so far by about 300 teachers, which may not sound like many, but I think for us, we're like, well, actually, that's quite a few in just a few months. And we're excited to see where it goes over the next few months. So that was one thing that came out of that project that we were able to collaborate to come up with a practical outworking from. But as well as revealing a need that we were able to kind of rapidly pull something together on, that research project on promising practices in refugee education in high-income contexts also revealed some critical gaps that we're still working on. So the first of the themes that came out where there was good practice but also gaps was access to quality education in the national education system. And I just want to draw your attention to the third promising practice there. So under each of these subheadings, we identified kind of concrete practical examples from across Europe, Hong Kong, the US, Canada, where the really helpful and possibly scalable things were happening. But if I can draw your attention to the third one, which is adapting the curriculum so that key milestones can be achieved. This was a real gap across Europe. We came across 2 schools in the UK who had developed programs where they were able to bring young people with low-level English and significantly interrupted education into school at about age 14 or 15, and put them through a modified and adapted program, preparing them for their GCSEs, so I guess high school diploma or whatever the equivalent might be, by embedding subject-specific English language support and additional intensive learning hours. And that was brilliant. But it was like a drop in the ocean. And so chatting to Polly, over the course of the last few days, and also having followed their work for a number of years, I think this is a classic example where high income contexts have a lot to learn from the global majority world and how countries have responded to the education crisis. And Polly, as co-founder and co-executive director, oh dear, it's the old slides. There we go. They were supposed to be deleted. What Amala Education have done, I think, in my humble opinion, is that they've got a brilliant example of having seen a gap and a blockage that people say, you can't move to the next step of education unless you tick this box, and it's not going to be possible for you to tick this box. And they've shown that actually in Jordan, in Kenya, that you can, and that there is an innovative way around it. And I'm really excited to see what other contexts can learn from this. So I'm going to hand over to you. Do you want this one?
Yeah, I have the same one. Thank you so much, Catherine. A pleasure to be included last minute in this session. So we have spoken a lot at this conference about the challenges around secondary education access for refugees, and it was presented on the first day, that intensive drop-off rate that we see from starting secondary education to finishing. I think it goes from 41% who start to 7% who access higher education. So we know there's a huge number of students who, despite our best efforts, are dropping out of the system. And when they drop out, they find it very, very hard to get back in. Often these are students who have huge financial pressures, as was discussed in the panel yesterday, to work, to support their families. In the case of girls, to be married off, potentially, to bring in some immediate income for their families. And there are very few ways, in a lot of contexts, for those youth to re-enter education systems once they are out. There's actually another category of young people to consider here, which is youth who cross a border aged 17 or 18 or even 19 potentially, but there is a category of youth who have engaged in secondary education in their home countries, but find themselves having to then resettle their families in their host country and unable to enter. And often when someone turns 18, it's very, very hard to get into the system in the place where they are. We see that youth are consistently under-prioritized, unfortunately, in emergency and protracted settings. As was presented on the first day, a huge kind of challenges around funding in these contexts, and obviously secondary and tertiary education are much more expensive than primary. But at Amala, the organization that I run, we have sought to respond to this issue around kind of upper secondary education and secondary education completion. And we have developed a second chance pathway for youth who have had to drop out or can't be included in the national system of the host country to complete their secondary education and to be able to be integrated and to thrive in their new communities. We developed this program from scratch in collaboration with refugee youth. It took us about 2 years to develop, and we made sure that it was tailored to the needs and their desires for education, which was, and what we heard from so many youth was, yes, I want to finish my secondary education, but I want an education that equips me to make change in my family, to make change in my community, to make change in the world. And so we developed it on that basis. And so the learning that students participate in really focuses on that sense of agency. How do we build that sense of agency throughout their studies so that they can go on to a whole load of different pathways? So the Amala Global Secondary Diploma is the name, is a 15-month program that basically compresses the last 2 years, or the equivalent of the last 2 years of school, into that short period. we have designed it to be super flexible. Where we have been working so far in both Jordan and Kenya, it is delivered in in-person learning centers largely by refugee communities themselves who we train, but we are also able to provide access to it online as well. I'll speak a bit more about that in a minute. In Jordan, for example, a lot of the students that engage in the program work, and so all classes are on the weekends, right? Because they're working during the week. So it has a very kind of flexible delivery model. And what else can I say about the core components? We do things a bit differently. We find that where learners get the most value is the ability to apply the competencies that they're developing to real world challenges. And so a lot of the learning takes place in the community. It's about that community improvement, but it kind of brings in the academic concepts within that. So it's very much applied learning. And we have an assessment system that is quite progressive and that we assess based on demonstration of those competencies. We've been running the program, as I said, in Jordan and Kenya since 2021. And just this year, we have gained accreditation after a very long process, a 3-year long process, which will enable us to take some really exciting next steps. What I want to say first, though, is that this program is a pathway to inclusion for refugee youth who have found themselves unincluded and often unoccupied in their lives. And we've seen some really promising initial results. So 48% of our alumni have accessed further education, and that includes higher education. We have seen, and this has been with this new program, some quite amazing results in terms of students being able to access higher education, both in Kenya and Jordan, where we're based, but also in Canada, in the US, in the UK, and in France as well. But not only that, we've also seen our alumni go on to kind of develop opportunities for work and entrepreneurship. In both places, actually, where we work, refugees are not allowed to legally work. And so it's incredible that 40% of our alumni are also pursuing livelihood opportunities, many of them setting up their own ventures to serve their communities. Accreditation has been a major topic of this conference. In the session that I was in yesterday, we were talking about some of the opportunities and the confines that accreditation creates. And we've discussed that we need accreditation in order to be able to quality assure the programs that we're running. And especially for us working at that upper secondary level, it's so important that that learning is recognized so that people can take their next steps. And so we, Amala, have been able to get accreditation from 2 leading accreditation bodies. One is called CIS, Council of International Schools, and one is called NAASC. They are American New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Some of the university crowd is probably familiar with them. It's the first time that they have ever accredited anything in a refugee setting. A lot of the time, these accreditors will accredit different schools, a lot of international schools, for example. So this was a big move for them to do this for us. And the incentive behind that was that they saw the moral imperative, actually, as we've spoken about so much at this conference. And when we showed them, the need that exists and told them about the role that accreditation can play in people being able to access these onward pathways. To be honest, that was our main calling card, and there was no guarantee that we would do it. We worked with them for 3 years, both agencies, trying to prove that this could work in the contexts that we work in, and that we could provide a really high quality of education. And I also want to say, because we are accredited, Amala is accredited essentially now, we are able to branch out and to both expand in the places where we operate, but also to look at new opportunities. And so there's a model for scale here, right? And so we are looking at, for example, places where refugees are or conflict-affected youth are not able to access education at all. So Afghanistan is coming up a lot. I've been speaking to people here about that. There is Afghan girls are not allowed. No Afghan girl is allowed to enter secondary education at this point in Afghanistan. There are quite a few kind of organizations that are working on this, providing online education. And so we're looking at whether we can serve that group of Afghan girls to provide them with this accredited diploma. I've also been speaking to people here at this conference about Malaysia. Malaysia is a specific context where refugees are not allowed into the national education system at all, and organizations end up having to do to provide very expensive examinations. I'm looking at Abdul Hamid over there, and very expensive examinations, often A-levels or otherwise GED, American GED, that are also not always contextually well suited to the learners themselves. And so we think that this can be a solution in many more places, and our model allows us to work with partners, and we've actually had some assurance even from the accreditors that as long as we quality assure partners, and they can see proof of that, we will be able to work with partners in this way. I think this is why Catherine chose for me to kind of come up and speak a bit about this, because we know how key the accreditation piece is. And I think Amala provides maybe an example to others that it is possible to move that system that we all exist within, and which can sometimes feel unmovable. And in a way, the moral purpose that we are all facing as we're looking at the increase in numbers of people being displaced, and the kind of options before us, it needs us to do it, basically. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Polly. I think it's just such a brilliant example of, well, positive encouragement of this being shared in so many potentially different country contexts. Because one of the things that I think I've experienced, and I'm sure many of us have experienced in engaging at a policy as well as a practice level in different contexts, is that every time there is a crisis, you have a Ministry of Education that will say, oh, okay, gosh, this is happening here. We need to think about what we could do and how we could respond. And often there's no time taken to look at, well, how have other people responded? What could we learn from what's also been done in other countries? And it feels so basic, and yet it doesn't happen. And it certainly happens very little in the UK. So I am really excited about what we can learn from the model that Amala have developed. And that is just one example that principle can be replicated across the board. So moving from secondary education onto what comes next, I'm going to just pass over to Professor Nick Gill from Exeter to take us forward.
Thank you very much. So can I click through the slides?
Yeah, do you want me to
Right.
put you?
I can do it.
Oh, other way.
Other way, sorry. Okay, yeah, great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Universities of Sanctuary, which is an initiative in the UK which brings together universities into a network to support refugees and people seeking asylum within university contexts. So let's rewind to 2013, first of all. And in this space, there really wasn't an example, in the UK at least, of universities doing engaged work to the level that students and academics that are interested in this topic wanted. So there was a gap, a research gap. And one of the things that triggered Universities of Sanctuary was the research conducted at a very small scale and quite informally to gather practices of what universities were doing in different pockets and in different regions of the UK to support refugees and asylum-seeking communities. That led to a handbook which now underpins the University of Sanctuary work. So really, the next few slides are the story of that handbook and the story of that applied research that was carried out in 2013 and 2014. So that's the definition of Universities of Sanctuary, a UK-wide network of universities, building a movement of welcome and belonging for people seeking safety. So as of today, Universities of Sanctuary number 38 across the UK. And what Universities of Sanctuary involves isn't just universities signing up and saying, we'll be a University of Sanctuary. There's an appraisal process, which is actually quite demanding and quite difficult to go through. And that's what makes it valuable. And that's why universities are proud of being Universities of Sanctuary. So they get awarded this, they get accredited this through an established process. There are 166 universities in the UK, so that's nearly a quarter of the sector that now describes itself as a University of Sanctuary. Why do universities become part of Universities of Sanctuary? It's to do with that confusion that I mentioned in 2013 about how to respond to the refugee issues, the refugee crisis that we saw unfolding at that time. There needed to be coordination, communication, and collaboration. There needed to be some form of network, and what universities get from joining a network like this is that guidance. It's that kind of solidarity to navigate this path, because without that, actually universities can be fearful places. They can be scared of governments, they can be scared of overstepping their legal mandates in terms of allowing people in, etc. So it's about supporting the ability of universities to act courageously in this space. Now, the process of becoming a University of Sanctuary is something that was in that initial research, and it's based on a model actually that was developed a few years previously by a charity called City of Sanctuary. So you'll have heard of City of Sanctuary probably, and in the UK there's a really nice, well-established charity called City of Sanctuary, and they have various streams of sanctuary, which recognize good work in this area in lots of different sectors. So, for example, there are libraries of sanctuary, there are gardens of sanctuary, there are schools is a really big one, but there was no Universities of Sanctuary stream. So that's what began this work. And all of those streams that City of Sanctuary manages has a model for auditing what is going on in the institution in question. And that model revolves around three principles: learning, embedding, and sharing a culture of sanctuary within that organization. So on learning, in the context of universities, what the handbook suggested was a whole range of different potential things that universities could do, from training to a refugee week on campus to sanctuary scholarships, and including information about refugee and asylum issues into curricula on campus that are being delivered to undergraduates and postgraduates. On embedding, the handbook suggested that universities should have a steering group to institute this drive towards having a culture of welcome on campus. So it's not just one individual and it's not just a flash in the pan. It's something that the steering group's talking about regularly. They're meeting regularly. They're reporting to senior managers regularly as well. And there are also a whole load of ideas in the handbook about other ways to embed, like having a STAR group. That's a student action for a refugee group on campus as well. And their work, STAR, is fantastic in this space. And then there's the, I keep pressing the button on my, and then there's the share. So another thing that we require, that Universities of Sanctuary require of universities in order to give them this accreditation, is that they spread the message. So they're not just doing this in secret, they're not doing it behind closed doors. They have to have a website, they have to have a named individual, they have to have someone that is contactable by the people that are wanting to come into the university. And otherwise, they're not going to get that accreditation. And this is, of course, it's speaking the language that universities understand. They love to have this accreditation. They love to have this kind of recognition. So we're using that to our advantage in terms of promoting this culture of welcome. And this is the appraisal process. It's quite an engaged process. So there'll be an application that arrives on the desk of Universities of Sanctuary, and there's a national steering group for Universities of Sanctuary. And I should say that it's led by experts by experience throughout. The whole process is led by experts by experience. So there's an application that arrives at the steering group. Then a panel is formed. The panel has to involve an expert by experience. It has to involve a current student in the institution. It has to involve a professional in the sector. Then we provide feedback to the institution. And that's the time when we can perhaps encourage them, push them, ask them to innovate in particular areas to try and deepen this culture of welcome. Then there's actually a visit, an in-person visit by that panel to the university, where we'll discuss the application and the university will respond to whatever comments have been made. And then hopefully, not always, and it's important that it's not always, but hopefully there's accreditation then. And then the universities usually want to have a presentation and there's some sort of reward. And then after 3 years, there's a requirement to reapply and become reaccredited so that the whole process continues. And we ask universities to put together a plan of action over those 3 years that will then get looked at in the reapplication process. There are a lot of resources that have grown up around this process now. So as I mentioned, there's the National Steering Group, which has a range of different constituents represented on it. There's a whole load of resources. So alongside the resource pack or the handbook that I mentioned, that's the same thing. There's also a website and there's quite an active mailing list. You'd be really welcome to join the mailing list. It's called sanctuary@giscmail.ac.uk. So it's up there, the fourth one on the screen. There's webinars and gatherings. There's an annual conference. So the last annual conference was in Edinburgh in 2023. The next one is the 17th of December in York, and you'd all be very welcome to that conference as well. And there's just a lot of momentum. The awards that is out of date now. Every time I come to these slides, I try and find the number. And the number's always going up, which is fantastic. So it's 38 awarded universities now across the UK. There are, of course, challenges and obstacles associated with this type of work. So first of all, kind of conceptually, what does it mean to be a university of sanctuary? There's been discussions in the network about, have we got the ideology right? Is it a bit too passive to be just welcoming? Do we need to be more proactive? And those are actually healthy and important conversations to have and are ongoing within the network. There are also challenges around funding. Now, we do ask universities to pay an accreditation fee of £1,000. It's less than a lot of other accreditors. So there's Athena Swan, for example, which charges a lot more. So we do ask for that funding, and that's allowed us to support a part-time worker, Mariam, who holds the whole network together and works way more hours, I'm convinced, than her part-time post dictates that she should. So there is that funding model, but we're always short of funding. There's always more we could do. So if any of you know any donors, then do come and talk to me. And then there's the governance. So the steering group, and having that steering group is fantastic, but the steering group's expanded recently and will continue to expand. We have this potential growth areas. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we're putting together a strategic plan that will look into these areas and how Universities of Sanctuary could develop its activities around campaigns, research, internationalization. We've had a number of requests from different countries to say, hey, come to Germany, come to Australia, reproduce this. And we've just not had the capacity to do it, but that's our hope and intention that perhaps we will get the capacity soon. And using digital methods to reach beyond the walls of the university, as we've been talking about, and as we've talked about on the panel as well. So last but one slide. One of the things that University of Sanctuary really emphasizes is that it's not just about letting students in to campuses. It's about a whole approach, getting the whole university involved. And universities are big, complex organizations. So what I've listed here are some of the things, some of the functions of universities, especially I'm thinking about elite rich universities here, and multiple activities of universities, all of which can be looked upon and audited with a sanctuary lens in mind. All of these, and that I think is something that's missing from the way that we often think about universities and refugees. It's not just about access. We can have a whole conversation about deepening cultures of sanctuary throughout the functions and activities of universities. So there's the list there. And one of the things I was going to invite you to do, and I don't know if now's the time, was to spend a bit of time thinking about how a university that you know or that you're familiar with might deepen its sanctuary engagement into some of the areas that perhaps are less obvious than simply letting people through the door. That's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Can I have the clicker back?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks so much. So what we want to do now, as Nick has just kind of alluded to, is pass the mic, as it were, over to you. And we're going to ask you, similarly to how we did on, I think it was the first day when we were asked to get into pairs and talk and listen without interrupting each other. We're going to ask you now to get into twos or threes where you're sat and discuss together. You're going to have 10 minutes in total, two things. Firstly, next question. So what are the innovative things that universities do or might do to integrate the values of sanctuary through their structures? So please try to make it as practical as possible. We're really looking to hear concrete ideas where you're like, oh my goodness, yes, we could do that. And the second thing is thinking about what Polly and I have been talking about a little bit more. Have you come across concrete and practical solutions or seen in the research that you've done things that would help refugee students get to that stage in the first place? So firstly, what concrete practical solutions, either from what you've seen in your practice or looked into in your research, can help young refugees get to the stage of university? And then secondly, how can universities integrate the values of sanctuary throughout their structures? We're then going to have a bit of a, I was going to say roving mic, but I don't think we can physically pick this up and run around the room. But we're then going to have the last 20 minutes of this session are going to be hearing from you, those concrete ideas. We're going to be writing them down, taking notes on what you're saying, and hoping that these might contribute to things that we can do a kind of further in-depth follow-up with, and might even lead to new partnerships. You never know. So 10 minutes, and then we'll gather people back. Okay, we have had our 10 minutes and I can hear some conversations are still going on, which is great. But we're going to draw it back together and we're going to start with the first piece. So could you raise your hand if in your group you discussed something to do with innovative solutions about helping students get to the point of being able to go to university, as opposed to what universities can do? Excellent. So most people, it seems then, were discussing practices at the university level. Okay, that's fine. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the situation in Lebanon and the difficulties for the Syrian refugees to access higher education because of not having the required documents and not having maybe legal status, even the language barriers and perhaps even cultural barriers. But I mean, what we were talking about was the need to ease those requirements for them to be able to have access.
And were you able to share any sort of solutions that you've seen or come across that were really helpful in that particular context? No worries. Okay. Anyway, yeah, Whitney. Okay. Oh, great. I mean, amazing. Whitney and then Hiba.
Perfect. Yeah, hello everyone. We talked about especially thinking about girls in unsafe environments or in camp or on the move. The reality of a really big piece being mentoring. And being able to see that there is a pathway. And so some great models that I've seen, one in Malaysia where there's a teacher training program especially for young girls as they graduate who then become the teachers, and how that's empowering even more to think, I can do this. This is possible for me. And in Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi, the importance of boarding opportunities for girls. As we see the test scores in primary, girls are outpacing the boys. And then about 12, 13, the girls' test scores start falling down a lot because of the demands at home. And the expectations that are on them as well. And so seeing a very practical step of having more boarding opportunities for girls in order to reach their potential and see that there is a pathway for them.
So thank you. Hiba.
Yes, thank you. I think similarly, I was thinking about how a lot of the conversations I've had with young people in Jordan and Lebanon, they've talked about how they never really had the vision of applying to universities, especially Ivy League universities. It didn't cross their mind that it could be something that they would be able to do. So even the simple aspects of how to build your CV, how to apply, what is a written sample if they haven't had the experience of doing that, is really problematic and can prevent them from even thinking about it. And I know that the University of Oxford they have a mentoring program and it's really amazing, but this year I think they had over 800 applications and they could only accept, I think, up to 80, or I can't remember. So I think it works really well. And I've heard from students who are doing that program that it's really helpful. It just there needs to be more opportunities like that.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, we've had several young people that we've worked with do the Oxford mentoring program, and it's amazing. Wonderful. Anyone else discussing at this? Oh, yeah.
I was thinking not only in entering universities actually, but staying positively, because in Italy, for example, we have many cases of refugees and students at risk entering the system, and then they were not able to reach graduation. So it might sound simple, but it is really important that the academia takes the courage to go outside academia. So networking with NGOs, local institutions, and creating a networking that can really give the power to students to stay inside the university in a positive way. In Italy, most universities are public, and so they have so many strict rules to respect about everyday life, management of fundings, and so it's really important to create a supportive network outside the universities.
Thank you. Anything else preparing for university? Oh, yeah. Excellent. There's one here and then one here.
Yeah, from Eastern Africa in Uganda, we've seen a university that admits refugee students, and when they get there, first of all, they do orientation for them just to integrate them with the rest of the students in the university. And then another thing that the university decided to do is like not to refer to them as refugees, but as international students, so that they feel a sense of belonging to the others. Then they also provide them with an opportunity to be treated equal as the rest. If it's an opportunity to vie for a position to be a student leader, they have that opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Would you be able to share which universities it is that?
That is Kisubi University in Uganda.
Thank you. Wonderful. And then going over to here.
I was going to jump into what universities could do to integrate.
Sure, go for it. We are at that time.
Oh, perfect. So one of the things I've seen in the States is that I saw a university that helps support students with the legal process by paying the attorney fees and the legal fees associated with whatever paperwork they had to do. And you know, to that point is like, how do you support students outside of the classroom, right? So it's really providing resources when it comes to health, housing, employment, and the legal structures, because those, I think, are some of the reasons why somebody would have to drop out or would not be able to finish, because these other things have now become a priority. And when you look at the success rates, is because you have this village, right? When we've all gone to school, think about all the support networks that we needed to rely on, and somebody really integrating into a society where they don't have that. I think they're a very vulnerable population. So I highlight the mentoring throughout the university process, and that was just one example of how you can further support students through really allocating resources through the legalization process.
Thank you. I should have said, can you introduce yourself at the start? With the last three actually speakers, mind just giving their name, and I can write it down so we can follow up if we need to.
Of course, Daniel Cortez, and I'm a professor at Villanova University in Pennsylvania.
Amazing.
My name is Obed. I work with the Jesuit Refugee Service in Eastern Africa.
I'm Elisa Gamba, University of Padua, and since I have the occasion at the last of these 3 days meeting, I'm also here representing an association which is part of the Astalli network, Popoli Insieme, located in Padua. So I'm both.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else want to share maybe the just best practice that you have seen in a university that you've worked with? Yeah.
Well, I raised my hand before you finished the question, because this is about an idea, not a best practice that I've seen.
Oh, ideas are great.
Okay, it's actually a response to a bad practice that I've seen. So my name's Danny. I'm a lecturer in politics at the University of Oxford, and something that I think came up a lot this year with the student protests and just different conversations surrounding specifically Gaza, but I think it applies to really any political issue that can come up. As we, I think, all know, universities are spaces of political discourse and contention for students. And I think for refugee students especially, this puts them in a really strange position, because I have students in my class and I have other colleagues who have students in classes who are from areas affected by current conflicts, and some of whom are formally refugee status, some of whom are not. But the point being that there is a kind of palpable anxiety around speaking up in class, especially in political, because I teach in political science. So it's like they're not fully participating because they're worried about their visa. And then we saw things really happen this past year, especially in UK universities, where the reaction to student demonstrations was to actually pull back on protections for freedom of speech. And again, this is not a statement on anything about the choices that students were making being like the ideal ones or not. It's simply to say that on any issue, there needs to be equity in terms of students' protections around freedom of speech that isn't inciting violence. And there was a lot of inequity that we saw happen with students, specifically students on visas, from areas affected by current conflicts. Some students in UK universities had their visas challenged and revoked. Some of this hit the news. After simply speaking up at a demonstration in a non-violent way, and this spills over into the classroom as well, where I think, like I said, some of my other colleagues have also experienced this. We have students not fully participating in classroom discussion because they're afraid about their visa. So the idea here being, the critique being, I think this was the wrong direction for universities to go in terms of pulling back on protections for freedom of speech. But I think what wasn't recognized is that pulling back actually inequitably affects the most vulnerable students, because UK British national students are not at risk to the same degree. They can go to protests, etc. Whereas you have refugee students who won't even speak up in a classroom on a topic that they have a reason to talk on. And that's a huge point of inequity. So the idea being a really perhaps controversial but intentional committee being formed to advise and advocate for freedom of speech for all students, but specifically for refugee students. I think that would be a really important step in the right direction. Just them knowing that they have someone that has their back to ensure that they have the same rights to freedom of expression as other students at university, especially during times of conflict.
Thank you very much, Danny. Yes, right at the back. We're going to take this one and then one more, and then it will be time for lunch.
I'm Ming Xiao with JRS, and I just want to go back to the previous question, Catherine, that you mentioned in terms of innovative programs. So this is a model that I came across about 15 years ago in the US. It's called the Posse Foundation, and I think it's a model that, as we think about how to integrate international students or students who are coming with refugee status, is to look at how, at least from the US perspective, how are we integrating and bringing in students from underrepresented and marginalized communities already domestically? And so Posse Foundation is a great example where, when we look at Black and Brown students that are trying to access higher ed in the US, it's very difficult for them, right? Even when they do access, they drop out. And so the founding of this organization really started with one student saying to his advisor, if I had my posse with me, I would have stayed, right? So this sense of posse, I'm not sure if everyone knows this term, is sort of my group, right? My group of friends. And so what this organization has been able to do over the last now 30 plus years is they've brought on nearly 70 university partners, many who are elite institutions that lay out 10 plus full ride scholarships for these students. And so that they go through the program together, and then the organization provides a holistic and supportive and wraparound services, including once they graduate, they're helping with them with internships or throughout, and then employment. So I think it's a really interesting model that's still relevant and could be considered for refugee and students with forced displacement backgrounds.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea of group scholarships, and also speaks to the point of needing to be more financially scalable and sustainable so that people can do that. It's a really, really great example. Thank you. Okay, yes. We don't, because we have to go to the airport. Sadly. So apparently we do have some extra time that we don't have to finish for lunch at the time that we thought. However, two of the three people on this panel need to go to the airport, but we can just pass over to Nick at that point to carry on, if that's okay. Yeah, we can take 5 more minutes for sure. Great. So we'll take 5 more minutes, at which point we'll pass to Anthony to decide whether he wants to send people to lunch or carry on in a reduced form with the conversation. Great. someone was about to, yes. Okay, it may not be only one more now, so go ahead.
Yes, we were thinking of the possibility of drawing on the existing networks we have both globally and nationally of the Jesuit universities. We have associations at a global level, but also at a national level, to begin with an inventory of what has already been done for analogous practices. For instance, you have in the United States 28 universities. There's already an existing network. There's been ongoing concern, for instance, for dreamer students, those who have come to the country but without legal documentation. Already their practices. So to begin seeing what is already being done successfully, best practices, then what can be done to enhance both at the global and national level, perhaps drawing on the model that you've presented, Nick, and facilitated by the Jesuit Refugee Service, where we could. And then a final question, too, I think, is looking beyond just the immediate university setting in USA or globally, but the enhancing the possibilities of distance learning with accreditation and certification for degrees for those in protracted refugee situations within the refugee camps. We already have, for instance, Jesuit Worldwide Learning. We have the Pathfinder program, but these are programs that could be enhanced, I think, and supported by the network of Jesuit universities, which is something that is quite limited at the moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And I'm Bill O'Neill from Jesuit Refugee Service.
Great. And then, yes, great.
Hi, I'm Elisabetta Dolzan from the University of Trento. We discussed two potential ideas. One more general, not sure if it's innovative, but it was the idea of getting refugee students involved in co-designing programs and I mean generally programs both for refugee students but also programs that have the objective of educating students on refugee and migrant issues. So not only seeing, let's say, refugee students as recipients of services or programs, but as directly being involved in designing and co-designing, let's say. And one other idea we discussed was sort of elaborating on the idea of sanctuary and University of Sanctuary, was the idea of having some sort of, sanctuary spots, let's say, across university campuses, like safe spots, safe places, where refugee students and anyone else really, but in particular refugee students know that they can find sanctuary and safety. Or they know they can find also people who are open to their issues. So sanctuary in that sense, both physical but also psychological, let's say.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Is that a combination of your pair discussion, or did you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to add that second point. It's the concept of placemaking. So it aligns with what Matthew mentioned just now about sense of belonging. So these are spots that could be curated and can be identified in places in a university. You probably would want sanctuary ambassadors to be involved in this, so that the spots could be safe spaces where there could be music, there could be counseling, there could be other stuff. Jonathan from Relief Singapore.
Thank you. I think that's a really beautiful note to end on. I'm going to finish just by saying thank you to the organizers. I realize that this isn't the last session for most people, but for those of us that have got slightly earlier flights, just to say a huge thank you so much for all of the hard work that's gone into organizing the last few days and for the kind invitations. Thank you. Yeah. We'll pass over to you, Anthony, to progress however you see fit.
Okay, so let's just see if there's any more questions, right? So questions or comments or responses to the questions that we've posed. Yes, there's Diego at the back.
Thanks, Nick. I'm going to have a very, very practical suggestion, which is something that I've seen done and not done, which is that oftentimes and I've seen universities not fully grapple with the fact that when a student enters university, they often have absolutely no idea of how anything works. And something that I've seen done in my master's was that the university prepared an information package, which was very, very direct and very, very concrete with a lot of practical information in it, which wasn't limited just to university courses, but also like, hey, there is a place that if you go there with your student card, it gives you a discount for lunch and, you know, other information about housing and this sort of stuff. This was really useful because when you enter university and you're, you know, part of a community or you already have some friends there, oftentimes there's a web of relationships that you can tap into and be like, I have no idea how this works, but Mark does, or, you know, this other guy does. But if you're a refugee, you don't. And depending on the type of course that you're attending, you know, if it's not a very small course, it's hard to make friends at first, and it's hard to find people that are willing to answer your questions. So if universities do this thing that is not, you know, too time consuming, as you only need to prepare it once, and then, you know, students don't always read these things, but if you index it and you make it, you know, accessible and not too difficult to figure out, that saves everyone a lot of time and a lot of stress. Thank you.
A very sensible idea indeed. And I know of some universities that do that. But yeah, it's something to be rolled out. Any other comments? Yeah, please.
I just wanted to comment that I've seen also groups on the internet that have been really powerful for people, and I don't know if there's any kind of like groups on Facebook or some other medium where just refugees are collecting on a global level just to support each other. And I've seen some of these spaces been so critical to people where it's just a sounding board of people that are going through the same thing, whether they're just miles away. And in a tough time, they could really rely on someone that just understands them and can hear them out in just a safe space. And I think that that could also be really neat.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the advantages of a kind of online space like that would be the possibility to enter it anonymously. So you don't necessarily have to divulge everything about your story, but you can still get that kind of solidarity. Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, please.
More of a question, following up on what Bill said on the different associations of universities that are there. So that there is networks already. So it's more of a question. For instance, in the UK, that there's national networks like the Russell Group and so on. Is it advisable, feasible to think about lobbying these groups or the International Association of Universities and things like, well, if you want to, it's part of the package. If you want to become a member, you need to be University of Sanctuary or something in that direction. I don't know if you have explored that.
Yeah, Universities of Sanctuary is kind of works alongside, is parallel to another kind of association, which is called the UK Humanitarian Higher Education Working Group. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but that one is a bit more top down. So if Universities of Sanctuary, you might imagine it as bottom up in the sense that it's expert by experience led, and it's very much attending to culture on campuses. The top down one invites those kind of national organizations to be on the steering group, and I think that one actually was set up in the wake of this conference 2 years ago, the kind of top down one. And I don't know if there's anybody else here who sits on that. I do sit on it, and I think it's been a positive development because it means that you can come at this thing from two directions. And on that top down group, we do have Universities UK International, and we've been in touch with a variety of Office for Students and various other kind of organisations at a national level. So my sense is that duality works quite well. Yeah.
Cecilia Nicoletti, Advocacy Officer at Caritas Internationalis. In Italy, we have got primary and secondary schools which are deeply connected with the wider networks of NGOs working in their territories, in the local communities. I wonder whether this kind of wider network exists or can be enforced, can be strengthened, also at the level of higher education. I mean, universities, public and private, with a wider network of NGOs working already in the local communities where the universities are placed. Because they offer a lot of spaces for encounter, for interaction, for support, even legal counseling, which can be, mutually reinforcing with those spaces which are offered by universities. So that is an idea on my side.
I think that's a really important point. There is a minimum requirement of the universities to be involved at that local level. But universities interpret that in different ways. But yeah, that's certainly something that the University of Sanctuary model expects of universities. And it's absolutely central, as you say, and can be really a strong catalyst to working not just with people who are affected by forced migration within the higher education sector, but also within the community more broadly, to opening up the resources of universities like libraries, gyms, the catering for resources to people who've been affected by forced displacement in the community generally, IT services, all those computers, what do we do with those after 2 years as a university? Well, maybe pass them on to the refugee charity in the local city.
If I may add, we have got concretely a challenge concerning, for example, asylum seekers who do not have the status, the refugee status yet, and also migrants who may be undocumented. How do they get to this kind of services and even to university studies? Because they cannot have scholarships, they are not, that is a big difficulty. And we are working with NGOs to facilitate and to give an opportunity also to this kind of refugees and people who have not a documented status, and they have no access to those official possibilities as others.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Are we winding it up now, or have we got any more comments? One more comment, perhaps? Yeah.
Sorry, just one comment. So I had the greatest pleasure to be able to work with University of Sanctuary and STAR in the UK, back in York. And I just want to highlight that they do fantastic work. And I've noticed a lot on the program, we've been talking about how do we get students integrated into these initiatives in helping refugees on campus. And I just want to say the model where University of Sanctuaries works with STAR groups has been a fantastic in that. From my personal experience, we ran across 2 years, we ran 18 different events, some ongoing, some individual, and we kind of got introduced to 300, 400 students getting involved in them across the 2 years. And they always came back being like, how do we get involved more? How do we want to go in more? And it was always kind of directing them to what University of Sanctuary is and how they can see that their university is actually making a difference. So I just wanted to say it's a fantastic scheme. It was a pleasure to be a part of, but I would really consider taking it back to your universities in some form and integrating the student part within it, because it was great. So.
Oh, thank you. I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah. Over to Tony.
Thank you both very much. Thanks for the comments during this session. A few practical announcements before we go to lunch. We'll reconvene at 2:30, no later than 2:30 back here. The Dean of the Faculty of Theology will formally greet us on behalf of the Rector of the University. Then we'll break up into those workshop groups, but I'll mention that when we get back together at that point. We have heard from Cardinal Czerny's office that we are able to distribute a copy of his talk that he gave yesterday. We'll do it on the RME newsletter, so you can go to our newsletter or our website. They'll be there, but I also can give out we can send individual copies if you let Liz at the desk know that you'd like us to email you a copy of his talk. Now, Veronica's going to tell you everything that I forgot to tell you.
That before lunch, we are going to have a picture here in front of the auditorium, and for those of you who need to arrange a drive to wherever you have to go, you can leave your name, the place where you have to go, and the time in which you're supposed to leave here at the desk outside. So we will try to arrange a group of people as much as we can. And of course, we invite you to be flexible in an half an hour matter of, moving. Thank you.
So please go outside and stand in front of this building. We'll take our picture, which usually takes 1 minute.
Yes, I think we. Amazing. Yeah, very briefly.